Okay, hi, Warren Hegg here, and welcome to this week's edition of Lancashire Legends. Delighted to welcome a former teammate of mine, former England captain, iconic Lancashire opening batsman, a massive part of our success in the late 80s and all the way through the 90s. Now Sky TV, now the Times chief cricket correspondent. Delighted to welcome a great pal of ours, Mike Atherton. Athers, how are you doing, pal?
Chucky, great to see you again. Fantastic to be here.
Yeah, it's always good to chat, mate. And like you say, just before we do start, you know, the days that we spent together in that Lancashire dressing room and growing up before we actually made our debuts, we've had some fun along the times. Hopefully, over the next half an hour or so, we'll touch on that.
Yeah, they were great days. I think if I, could be transported back to play again, and somebody said to me, which team would you go and play for? I'd choose the Lancashire teams, two Lancashire teams, really. I suppose we crossed over both. We had that early team with Foxy and Walt, Mendo, Simo, Yoza, and then the later team when we were more senior players. But I think for me, they were the happiest days of my career, really, for all kinds of reasons. One, you mentioned the fact that we'd come through the ranks. I think 6 or 7 of us signed from the Lancashire Federation team, which was the under-19 team. We all signed together, so we were playing with mates that we'd known for a long time. We had a lot of success, and we had a lot of fun along the way. So fabulous days. I recall them with such fondness. I know we might touch on it, but I sent you the other day, as you well know, I sent you some footage of your capping ceremony in 1989. We all gathered around, Cyril Washbrook, the president, giving caps to you, Waz, John Stanworth, Digger Martin, who looked unbelievable with a big bouffant hairdo. They were fantastic days.
Oh, they're brilliant. And some of the haircuts on show on that footage. If we get a chance to show that footage, it'll be hilarious, because Walt looked like...
We've got the current director of cricket, of course, in a pair of check strides and with a big mullet on and a moustache. He
looked like Rupert Baird, didn't he, in them check pants. It was great. And Digger looked like something out of Top of the Pops in the 70s with that. He looked like Howard Young with that big...
Well, Digger was my kind of roommate at the time. He was renting I had a flat in Didsbury, as you'll remember. And yeah. Digger was renting the second room in that flat. Obviously played with him all the way through under-19s as well.
Oh, we had some great fun, and we did, and we will touch on that, like you said. But 10 weeks into lockdown now, into isolation? Doesn't seem like it at the moment. But how have you been coping? How have you been coping with being cooped up?
Well, like everybody, just finding ways to pass time. In a funny way, I've been as busy or busier than normal, because there's been no live sport, but the newspaper, which I write for, you mentioned I write for the Times, that still comes out. There's always plenty to talk about, and on Sky we've been doing watch-alongs and podcasts and vodcasts of the type that you're doing and we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I've been really busy, which has been good. I mean, I'm the type of person who likes to stay busy and likes to feel, relatively useful. So finding ways to fill the time through writing and doing the stuff on Sky has been fantastic. But missing the cricket, obviously, we all are. It seems such an odd summer without any live cricket. I've got a young lad who's 18, my eldest son, or my son. He's on the academy at Middlesex in the final year of the academy. So he was looking to push for a pro contract, and you'll have plenty in that position at Old Trafford. And so they're really missing it. So I feel for them. I feel for the lads who are in the final year of their pro contracts. You've probably got a few at Old Trafford. I know there's about 135 across the country, I think, in their final years. So it's going to be very tough for them to push for another pro contract. So lots of areas of the game who are really suffering and struggling.
Big time. And we've had lots of lads from our era and from our team on this Legend series. And I have to say, others, there's only me and you looking our age. We look pretty good. We've got our own haircuts, and we've a couple of them now got
Well, I saw Yozza on the other day, and I thought Yoz was looking incredibly well. I don't know how old he is now. He must be 70 odd or something. Early 70s.
93.
I mean, I thought he looked incredibly well. He was our first captain, of course. Always, I mean, impeccably dressed.
Yeah.
A real, dapper guy. I thought we were so lucky to have him as our first captain, but it was great to see him on the show the other day. Bumped into him last year, of course, along with you when we were at Jack Bond's funeral, which was a very sad occasion, but it was good to see Yoz. Did you do that was he in the States when you did that?
He was in North Carolina, and we talked and laughed and giggled. You know how Yozza gets when he gets into them old stories, and he talks about the old days. And
well, I did listen to him talking through that tale of Dexter Fitton careering over the boundary boards at Cheltenham, which was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on a cricket field. I was stood next to you at slip, and I nearly wet myself. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then, of course, we all got from Winker, who was the captain, or he was bowling or something. But fantastic.
That was a real poignant moment in my career. He's looking at you. I mean, I had the big gloves, so I could put the glove over my face and I could laugh. But you were beside yourself as Dexter disappeared over the Britannic insurance sign with his legs up in the air and his Reeboks hanging out, and you were uncontrollable. And you got
gone
because you got the brunt of his mouth.
And in fact, I remember that game well, because that was the game where I got called up for England for the first time. It was at Cheltenham.
Was it?
And I got hit on the head before lunch by Courtney Walsh.
Yeah.
I had a resounding headache for the rest of the game and got called up for the first test then. It was just after the Rebels, the Rebel tour was announced to South Africa. I remember that game for all kinds of reasons.
I do remember now that. I didn't realise it was the same game, because I remember when you did get called up, I thought, wow, Addy's going to have to open the batting now in a test match. That's, suddenly stuff's got real. He's,
I didn't know very long. I just got a naught in my first innings for England. I've got a question for you. I wrote out our two teams that we kind of crossed over.
Yeah.
And so the first one in the late 80s, early 90s, Fowler, Mendes, Atherton, Fairbrother, Watkinson, Hegg, Simmons, Hughes, Allott, De Freitas, Akram. Second team, Gallion, Atherton, Crawley, Fairbrother, Lloyd, Watkinson, Hegg, Austin, Chappell, Yates, Martin. In a match-up between them, which one wins?
Which one was Akram in again?
First one. He gives us the edge in the first one, do you think?
Yeah, I think he gives us three extra players in that first one. But that second team for me was a real dynamic and rounded team that knew in both eras. Everyone knew their role in the team, so we were comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
But that's a really hard question. I'm probably going to have to go with that.
Akram, De Freitas, Allott.
Yeah.
Probably just trumps Martin, Chappell, Austin.
Yes, it does. And Akram probably being the pivotal man.
Yeah, well, what a great overseas player he was. You've had him on, haven't you?
We've had Waz on from the depths of Lahore. Yeah, he's spoken. He's still got a bee in his bonnet that Harvey got a man of the match in Leicester.
Well, I saw the club tweeted out that action the other day of Waz, reversing it and knocking over Leicester. I hadn't remembered that Harv got the man of the match, actually.
Yeah, Harv got man of the match for a dogged 61 over Waz's 5 for Spitz.
Well, he was a fantastic overseas. I mean, when you think of the overseas players that Lancashire have had down the years, starting with Clive, I was writing about the West Indies arriving today.
Yeah.
And how many of those West Indians had long careers in county cricket? 4 of them played more than 200 championship matches. So Clive was at Old Trafford between 68 and 86, I think, and played more than 200 games. Yeah. And we had Farouk for a long time, Waz for a long time, Morley for a few years. We had fantastic overseas players, really. So lucky.
We were so lucky, and that's why I think they were integrated into the family of the club now. And you look back so fondly because they were there for every game, and they became part of our
part of the furniture. And Clive still lives in the county. Farouk still lives in the county. I was thinking about the start of my career at Old Trafford. Obviously, I started at the same time as you, and I think the luckiest thing I had, actually. Do you remember that group of fast bowlers that Pete Lever put together?
I do.
Pete was the coach, as you'll remember. Jack Bond was the manager who signed us, and Pete Lever was the coach. And it very, very quickly turned over. They lost their jobs at the end of that time. But Pete put together a group of fast bowlers. And these names will mean nothing to your viewers, I don't think, apart from Pete Martin, who was one of them. There was Dan Rayton, Fran Daly, the Royton Rocket, Alan Turner.
Alan Turner, that's right.
Pete Lever got these lads running in off about 17 yards and bowling ferociously quick. And I think it was the best kind of training for 2 years I had just prior to getting into the first class game, because by the time I got into the first class game, I didn't face anything again that was as quick as those lads off 17 yards. So it was fantastic grounding that Pete Lever gave us. And then on Saturday morning, we used to go up to his house in north of Rochdale. And he set cross country route of about 5 miles or so. So it was a combination of realizing what you needed to do in terms of physical fitness to become a first class player, and then for me as a batter, facing the kind of stuff that I would eventually then face in first class cricket and international cricket was fantastic. Did you face those lads or not? I can't really remember.
Well, you know how much of a gibbering wreck I was when I went out to bat. That was the start of it. After that, I remember thinking, I've got other.
Well, I remember the winter. There was a winter, and Foxy and Harv turned up one day with all these young lads and Pete Lever, getting them to bowl off 17 yards, and they faced about 3 balls and then just walked out and said, "We're not having any of this." No. It's unbelievably quick stuff.
Well, I don't know if you remember Steve Titchard, obviously our teammate for a long time at Lancashire. He got donged on the head every week in that indoor school, every week without fail.
Incredible.
Big upright stance and big, beautiful front dogger. Boing, he gets smacked on the head, and that's the Titchard as nails. But it shaped us. It shaped us as players. And oh God, I can't imagine it now. But
as you know, sorry, go on.
No, go on. You finish because
well, I'm just saying that in that time, every county had an overseas fast bowler. So Daniel at Middlesex, Marshall at Hampshire, Tony Merrick at Warwickshire, Tony Gray at Surrey, and Pete Lever's training ground for young batsmen like me was so valuable, really.
Yeah, it did. It shaped our careers, like we said. And let's talk about your careers and where you started, because we, a lot of people remember you as, the England opening batsman, England captain. But we all start somewhere, and that's the beauty about our game, that we all start off on the same level playing field. And you started your career at Woodhouses Cricket Club in the Lancashire and Cheshire League. What memories have you got of that?
Oh, fantastic memories. You're right, Woodhouses, Lancashire and Cheshire League. I think it's now called, is it the Lancashire County League? It's not the Lancashire and Cheshire League.
It's the Greater Manchester Cricket League now, around that area.
So lots of clubs. You were at Stand, Unsworth. So my very first game for Woodhouses I was 14. I actually took my dad's place in the team, so that's how I got into cricket. Got into Woodhouses through watching my dad, and I eventually replaced my dad in the team. And the very first game was against a club called Thornham, which you'll nothing. Yeah. And their overseas player was a guy called Roy Gilchrist, who was a great West Indian fast bowler, but he must have been 50. I mean, he must have been 50 that day. Helmets, of course, got hit in the mouth with a bouncer from Roy Gilchrist, my first club match. Against Thornham, but I played for Woodhouses all the way through until I made my debut for Lancashire. Yeah. And then we had this bizarre rule in the Lancashire and Cheshire League, which you'll remember, that once you became a cap player for Lancashire, you could no longer then play for your club. So I wanted to play the odd days on Saturday when we didn't have a game, but the league rules forbid you to play. So I never played again for Woodhouses after making, my first class debut for Lancashire.
It's true. Yeah, it is true. And you grew up that your mum and dad were an integral part of Woodhouses, and always around. And if I can remember rightly, Woodhouses, it was next to a pig farm.
It was, yeah. It was,
And
well,
the smell.
it was well, I don't have a sense of smell, bizarrely.
You don't, do you?
An
No.
odd thing, but I was well placed for it because, as you say, there was a farmer called Len, and he had a pig farm right on the side of Square Leg, really, as you were batting at the pavilion end. And at tea time, he'd feed the pigs, and there'd be an almighty noise, unbelievable noise as these pigs were feeding. And secondly, an almighty stink, which having no sense of smell, I didn't realise. But one of our earliest pros at Woodhouses was Farouk. Farouk came and proed for Woodhouses for 2 years at the end of his Lancashire career.
Right,
So I vividly remember at the end of each of those years, we gave Farouk a benefit game at Woodhouses, which was no doubt part of his kind of fee as the pro. And one of those years, he brought Clive, Mikey, all these Lancashire legends that, I grew up kind of watching and thinking about. And they all came to Woodhouses one day. And I was thinking, actually, I could probably name that Lancashire team that I started to follow in the early mid-70s. I'd probably name it off the top of my head, which was Lloyd, Wood, Pilling, Hayes, Lloyd, Simmons, Hughes, Engineer, Lever, Lee, Shuttleworth.
That's a good memory, mate.
That's pretty good. I used to kind of, in my scorebook, I'd play that game, how's that? And that was my Lancashire team. And quite a few of those guys came to Woodhouses for Farouk's benefit day. So I got to meet all those heroes and legends very early on. Yeah,
sadly, it doesn't happen that much anymore with benefit games. But we did have some fantastic days there, and like I say, you weren't just an opening batsman in those days. But bowling was a massive part of your game. And people don't realise you got a shed load of wickets, first class wickets, bowling leg spin. But one of my early my early memories of you bowling leg spin is I couldn't read you, and I don't know if you remember this. I couldn't read.
You gave you a signal.
There was a signal. Can you remember what the signal was?
I reckon the signal was either I rubbed my hand or I shone it on the back of my trouser.
That was the googly. So the back of the pants was the googly, and the front was the normal leg spinner. Because I was absolutely hopeless. I was this raggy-hard ranger from Sand Cricket Club who'd never come across a leg spinner before, and I was down the offside, and it was the googly shooting down the leg side. So I said, we're going to have to. So that was a stick, and we had that. We had that right the way to first class. We used that in first class cricket. Back googly, front.
I bowled quite a lot, as you said. I bowled a lot when I was a junior player, and then even until I had a back operation, which was about 1991. I bowled quite a lot in those first 2 or 3 years for lengths. I think I got 40 odd wickets one year, 1989 or something, and really enjoyed it. But after the back operation, I couldn't bowl. Gone.
No, which was a real shame. Because, like you said, it was a really good string to your bow of being able to throw it to others and come and get some wickets. But people don't realise as well that you did struggle with your back quite early on in your career, and it did hamper you. And some of the days you turned up to OT or you turned up to play for Lancashire, and probably others, no doubt, England, in a lot of pain.
Well, I think the difference now is that I wouldn't have been able to get the kind of level of painkillers that I used to get to play. You're right. I had this, back problem throughout my career, and I had an operation in 1990 or 91 thereabouts. But basically, I played on painkillers every day of my first class career. So Voltarol was the anti-inflammatory of choice. I'd take 200 milligrams of Voltarol a day, and I did that for 13 years. But you just used to be, as you would remember, you just used to be able to get strips from the physio. We didn't really worry about it. You just get thrown strips and strips of anti-inflammatories. And without those anti-inflammatories, I wouldn't have been able to have a career. I wouldn't have been able to play. But I've often wondered about today's environment, because I don't think the players now, because of potential for lawsuits or whatever, there are limitations on the level of anti-inflammatories you can be given. I know at England level, they have a traffic light system now for players. Amber, you've got to be careful. As soon as a player's on a red light, no more anti-inflammatories. Take a few weeks off and get yourself right. I wouldn't have been able to play without anti-inflammatories, so I suspect I would have had a much more limited career.
There's no doubt about it, mate. We could have picked you up and rattled you, and you could have heard the pills inside you. You took that many, but you made your Lancashire debut very, very early on, 1987. I think you were still at Cambridge. Is that right? At Downham at Cambridge. So tell us a bit about your debut for Lancashire, because you must have realised a dream.
Yes, I played. You're right. I was at Cambridge. I'd signed in 1987 by Jack Bond, but I'd signed to play half years. So I'd be at Cambridge between April and June. And then once exams had finished, term had finished, I'd come down and play for Lancashire. And I had the great advantage of playing first-class cricket at Cambridge, which was the only reason really why I got into the Lancashire team so quickly, because I was getting a lot of runs down at Fenners. I was quite high up in the averages. I mean, I remember actually in 1987 that Yozza came under a lot of pressure from the members. I wasn't picked immediately first game when I got back, and the members kicked up a stink, and Yozza put me in the team. So my debut was at Southport. I didn't have a car. My mum drove me to Southport. I don't know whether you remember the game, but the pitch was like a beach. It was an absolute beach. We beat Warwickshire in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Foll got, I reckon Ian Foley got 12 wickets in the match. Jack Simmons got 8 in the match. We beat Warwickshire in 2 days. They had a fast bowler called Tony Merrick, who used to hit us on the head for fun.
Yeah, that's right.
And I got a few. I got 50 on debut, and Harv got a few. We didn't need that many because it was a very low-scoring game, and the game was done in 2 days.
Brilliant. And that team you came into, you mentioned before, full of big characters, full of massive characters.
It was quite a tough school, actually. And you mentioned the two, Foxy and Walt, who were the two big players, really. They were the two England players from the early, mid-'80s. And I remember my first Roses match. I think it must have been my first Roses match, which was at Headingley. And the changing rooms then, as you will remember, were at Square Leg, not like now behind the arm. There was that old building at Square Leg, and that's where we changed. And they used to have washing machines in the dressing room. And I can remember in that first Roses match, Walter bowled virtually unchanged before lunch. And he put his socks in the dryer or the washing machine to dry for this afternoon session. And for some reason, I turfed his stuff out and put my stuff in. I don't know why I did it. But this enraged him. And I remember that game in the evening. He said him and Foxy were going for a drink in Bradford. And they said, would you like to come to me? And I said, sure, I'll go with these guys for a drink. And they were sat at the bar. We were all sat at the bar in this hotel in Bradford. And Foxy said, I just need to go to the toilet. And he got up. About 2 minutes later, Walter said, I'm just going to the toilet. And he got up. And I thought, aye, there's something going on here. And they were going to leave me in Bradford with no money, no way of getting back to Leeds. So they kind of used to test you early on as a player. And you had to stand up for yourself. If you stood up for yourself and gave as good as you got, you were fine. But if they didn't, they'd run all over you.
Well, I remember it was called the Allerton Fowler attitude adjustment. And remember that, the attitude, and it used to sometimes include Walter's Slazenger V12, very heavy bat
around the back of your head.
And great times with those two fellas. And like you said, that class of our class of '92 that came up, the likes of Atherton, Fairbrother, Hegg, Martin, Yates, who'd grown up together. We got it pretty tough early on.
Remember, there was the dressing rooms at the time. You had the first 11 cap players' dressing room. You had the second 11 cap players' dressing room. Then there was the dressing room at the back for the uncapped players. The captain would have his own room in the middle. I know it's all different now. Everybody's just together under one roof. Everybody's together as it should be. But in those days, it was very hierarchical. You had your cap players, and nobody really said boo to them. And that's just how it was. And it was very different by the end of our careers, but that's how it was when we came into the dressing room.
Can you remember having to knock on the first team door before you went in?
Absolutely.
You had to knock, yeah. People don't believe me now. They say no chance, not having that. But yeah,
and the captain had his own room.
Yeah, totally different game. But let's move on, Ath. And you had a great start to your career. You were always known affectionately as Feck. We the lads who knew you and grew up with you from never called you Feck, ever called you Feck.
No.
But we never called you. We called you plenty of other things, but we didn't call you Feck. and your career moved on, and you played for England, and it must have been amazing to play in that era. And I've written some notes down about the fast bowlers that you played against in Test matches, the great West Indian teams, the great duo of Waqar Younis, Wasim Akram, and Pakistan. That was a really testing era to open the batting.
It was. I mean, I'm never somebody who likes to say, it was better in my day or back in my day, because I genuinely believe, in fact, you're talking about fast bowlers, there are some fantastic fast bowlers around today, but that particular era had a lot of great fast bowlers for sure. So you mentioned the West Indies side. I think the first West Indies team that I played against in 91, the attack was Ambrose, Walsh, Patterson, Marshall, fantastic attack. Wasim and Waqar that you mentioned, Donald and Pollock for South Africa. South Africa had just come back into international cricket in 92. Australia, of course, would have had Merv, Billy McDermott, Glenn McGrath, Jason Gillespie. India, Srinath and Prasad, who were a pair of decent bowlers as well. So every team had a good new ball attack for sure. It was an unusual period in that we hardly played on the subcontinent at all. We used to play Australia, South Africa, West Indies in 5-match series a lot in my time. In 100 and whatever games I played, 110, 15 test matches, I played one test match on the subcontinent in India. Really? Three in Pakistan, maybe 3 in Sri Lanka. But England teams just didn't go to India in those days. It's not like now where India is the destination of choice for all kinds of reasons. England teams just didn't go there in the 1990s. I don't think we toured India between 93 and 2001. So a lot of them were 5-test series against West Indies, Australia, South Africa, who happened to have the fast bowlers. So I played against those fast bowlers a lot, and lots of rivalries developed.
And opening the batting throughout the eras, Ath, has not changed, has it? The ball's still the same weight. It's still rock hard. It still hurts when it hits you under the ribs. And when people to me about opening batsmen and having what attributes you need to be an opening batsman, and I always look back on the duels you had, and one that really sticks to my mind, and for every cricket fan, is that duel you had with Alan Donald at Trent Bridge. Serious pace like fire. And you
will remember AD from, in fact, the earlier days. Before South Africa got into international cricket, which was in 92, I think, or 91, he played for Warwickshire from about 89 onwards. And he was probably actually quicker then than he was later on. So the duel you're talking about was in 98 between myself and him at Trent Bridge.
Yeah, that's it.
He was still fast, but he was a kind of controlled fast bowler by then. In those early days at Warwickshire, I don't know whether you remember a game where he put Speaky and Waz in hospital with stitches under their jaw, and he was a bit wild, but he was unbelievably fast then, and he was much more controlled and a better bowler by 98, but not perhaps he was maybe at half a yard slower.
But fast bowling didn't seem to phase you, and we always giggled, didn't we? We always wrestles in the dressing room, and with the giggling, and others was one of those guys that put you under your arm and try and fight 3-0, and he wouldn't get out. But put a Gray Nichols power spot on your hand and a pair of pads on your hand, you turned into a different person.
Well, I enjoyed the contest. I think for me the game was about being in a contest with a guy at the other end, and I enjoyed that competition. I enjoyed those rivalries, and I was lucky. I was never scared of fast bowling. I don't think anybody in their right minds would say they enjoy facing somebody like Marshall or Donald at that kind of speed, but I was never scared of it. I think you're always slightly uncomfortable and slightly concerned you might get hurt or whatever, but I was never scared of fast bowling, and I enjoyed the contest. They were the moments that you kind of feel alive on the cricket field. They're the moments that you played for, really. So yeah, I look forward to those contests for sure.
When you finished that, did you miss that? Did you miss that when you called it a day on your career? Did you miss playing cricket?
I was ready to stop because of what we touched on before, which was the injuries. Really, the back issue, the amount of anti-inflammatories I had to take. I had the surgeon in Manchester, who's a very nice guy called Brad Williamson, who used to pop cortisones in every 6 months from the Bupa Hospital in Cheadle or somewhere. And the last time he did it, which was that last year that I played, 2001, he just said, I can't give you any more. He said, your back is going to be in such a horrendous state. If I keep giving you these cortisones, it's going to do you no good. So I knew from about midsummer in 2001, when I had that last cortisone into the disc space, I knew that was it. And they used to last about 6 months. But for all those reasons, I was ready to stop. I'd had enough, really. But all the great side of the game, the great bits of the game, the mateship, the dressing room, the contests that I talk about against the fast bowlers, I certainly missed that side of it. But, the getting up every day, not being able to move, stiff, sore, too many anti-inflammatories, I didn't miss all that. So I was kind of ready to stop. I'd had my fill of that.
Very, very similar to me. It was my decision again to call it a day at cricket, and I look back and I enjoyed my last year so much, of enjoying everything that we'd done, the players I've played against, the great grounds I've played against, and the memories that I had. I enjoyed every minute. And when I finished my career, that was it. I felt like it was the end of that era, and now to do something else with no bitterness. And I suppose that's an ideal way to finish your career.
I think if you've had a longish career, B, if it's been successful, C, if you feel you've achieved everything you wanted to achieve, then it makes it much easier to move on. And, as I said at the start of this chat, I look back at my times with Lancashire with such fondness. I mean, I live more down south now. I'm not often at Old Trafford. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when I do go and stand on the middle of Old Trafford now, it's just such a different ground. I can't even envisage having played there. The ground's switched round, the hotel, the point, it just looks completely different ground, and a much better ground, I might say, than when I played there. But, I'll always look back with great fondness at those times at Old Trafford with the players that I played with, the games we played in, the team we had. Yeah. They're great memories to take.
Doesn't get any better, mate. It doesn't get any better. And before, like I said, we have to touch on you reached the pinnacle of your career. You're England captain, and when we were playing in the under-13s and the under-14s, if someone had said to you, "You will be England captain one day," would you have believed them?
Well, it's funny. I remember, I think the very first time I played at Old Trafford was a Lancashire North versus South under-13s game. Cedric Rhodes, who's the chairman of the club, you'll remember, used to allow the under-13s a day at Old Trafford. And I remember vividly at the end of that first day at Old Trafford, there was a local kind of radio celebrity or whatever you'd call him. He came and gave the Man of the Match award. Can't remember his name now, but I can remember the award. And he said something like, I'll lay good money that out of this lot here, one or two of you will go on to play for Lancashire and England. And I can remember thinking that was such an outrageous kind of idea that anybody would go on and play A for Lancashire and B for England. It was so far out of the thinking. But of course it happened, and a lot of us went on to play for Lancashire, and a few of us went on to, enjoy careers with England as well. And, you can't, given the captaincy of your country is the greatest honour you can get. You can't say beyond that.
We went with Winker the other day. We spoke to Winker, and Winker said when he got his cap, he said, "Well, that's it. You ain't having it back. You can't take it off me now." And I was in the same boat. Once you get that cap in your hand, the 3 lions on your chest, and it is the proudest moment of your life. And you went on to play over 100 Test matches for your country, and I suppose you're still involved in cricket. You had a great career. You've got a good career now post cricket. I suppose it won't actually hit you what you actually did until your pipe and slippers
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think about it unless I'm doing something like this with you and I'm asked the question. I never think about my career now. I don't have any memorabilia in the house. I don't. No. I have one thing actually. Jack Russell very kindly gave me a little oil painting of our stand at Johannesburg in 1995, and that's up in the house. It's the only bit of memorabilia that I have. I have the other stuff somewhere. I have all my Lancashire caps, England caps, Man of the Match awards, all those kind of things, but they're in a box somewhere in the attic, and I don't have anything on show. So I'm not somebody who is constantly, looking back or thinking back. But, when I see the boys from Old Trafford, it's an absolute pleasure to see them. When I go to the club, it's great to go there. Many happy memories. All those memories are there and they can't be taken away. It's just that I don't particularly dwell on them. Life is for living and moving forward and not looking back.
I'm very, very much the same as well, and people, and it's almost a distant memory now. Those great days we had at Lord's with the travelling Lancs fans going down. It's almost a distant memory until something sparks it. Oh, I remember that. And
yeah, well, social media is such now that you see the occasional clip. We saw Waz knocking over Leicestershire the other day. Saw your catch off. Was it Nasser in the cup final? Somebody posted that early on in lockdown. It made me chuckle. So you do get these reminders that make you drift back into the day, but it's probably best not to live your life in the past.
No, it's not. And Nasser always commented. He said it never carried that. I said, well, one hand, one bounce was always close enough for you.
Good enough for him.
Exactly. Let's move on to current days now. Before we finish, we've just heard that in the last week or so that the West Indies are coming over. They're going to play a series of matches behind closed doors. You'll obviously be involved in the reporting on those games. What do you think lies in store for those matches and how England are going to perform?
Well, fingers crossed they go ahead, first of all, because obviously we've had no cricket so far, and some cricket is better than no cricket, even if it's going to be behind closed doors with no fans. It will feel very odd and very different to see an Old Trafford Stadium completely empty, for a test match is going to be very strange. But for all the broadcast reasons, money reasons that they get for the broadcasting deal, fingers crossed that those games go ahead. If they do, both teams are in the similar boat in the sense that they haven't had much practice, or they will have had their months prep from now to the test match, but no real match practice. Looking at the West Indies team, their batting looks very suspect to me. Their bowling, I think, will trouble England. People like Alzari Joseph, is a good bowler. Shannon Gabriel's coming back from injury. Yeah. Their bowling will still have enough to trouble England, I think, but I think their batting looks a little suspect, and they're missing, of course, a couple that decided not to come in, Darren Bravo and Shimron Hetmeyer. So I'd expect England to win, but who knows? West Indies hold the trophy. They beat us last time in the Caribbean, and who knows what will happen.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It'd be interesting for them at Old Trafford to house the two test matches, like you say, if they go ahead. And I'm quite interested to see the atmosphere. It'll be just like playing at Woodhouses on a Saturday afternoon.
Well,
and one man and his dog.
We have seen tests with nobody in them. I've commentated on a few games at the UAE in Dubai and the Emirates, where England have had to play Pakistan when they were in exile, and there was literally nobody in the ground. So it'd be very similar. And it's tough, actually. It's tough for the players because some players, not everybody. Alistair Cook got 264 in Abu Dhabi, I think, and he was always a player, a bit like Graham Gooch before him, that I think would have just loved to bat whether there was 100,000 people in the ground or nobody in the ground. But some players feed off the energy of the crowd, and there won't be any of that, of course. And it's going to be difficult for commentators because as a commentator, you pick up on the energy of the crowd and the atmosphere in the ground. And there'll be none of that either. But as I say, at least some cricket were better than no cricket.
Absolutely, mate. And it's, I think that's a really poignant subject to finish with. It's been brilliant to chat to you, mate. Again, great to catch up. Like you say, you live down south now. We don't catch up with you much, but when we do, we always the same stories come out, the same memories come out, and we just seem to kick it off from where we left off. But glad to see you looking so healthy, mate. Glad to see you're all right, and we'd like to thank you for joining this series. It wouldn't have been a series without you, and it's we really appreciate your time.
Well, it's a pleasure. I mean, I had fantastic days at Old Trafford, so I'm delighted to be involved with everybody else. So great to see you, and hopefully catch up in a few weeks' time.
Fingers crossed. Cheers, Ath.